Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zervis, one of the technical evangelists at CTC, and today I'm joined by Brian Lewandowski, another one of our evangelists focusing on the civil side. We're going to talk with you today about Hive for AutoCAD. We're going to go through a fairly comprehensive introduction and direct you to some other resources that you might be able to use. So first off, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about AutoCAD block libraries migrating into the Hive space. We're going to talk about removing some of the messy tool palettes and other clumsy methodologies that we have for managing AutoCAD content. And for those of you who are multidisciplinary companies, showing you how you can manage all of your AutoCAD and Revit content from the same place. And we're also going to show you a couple of easy migration techniques that you can use to get from the old AutoCAD management methods into the new Hive methods. Very specifically, we're going to be talking in detail about AutoCAD block library support. We're going to add block content to Hive live in front of you, insertion tag modification or insertion property modifications, talking a bit about tags, talking about access control, and really how you can fully support your end users. And so that you know exactly what we're going to go through step by step, it's effectively going to be this. We're going to go through some basic concepts as to why we're talking about Hive, and why we're talking about replacing and sort of migrating off of the tool palettes into Hive. Brian's actually going to talk in detail about that. I'm going to take you through some basic end user interaction with Hive, how you can search and find some content. I'm going to ask Brian to make me some things because I'm signed in today as a basic end user. I have no admin rights today. And so Brian's going to actually create a library for me and add some content, doing some content distribution administration. And we're going to show you what that process looks like and how it's very different from tool palettes because we're going to update me, the end user, and let me find that new content that Brian's added. And at the very end, as always, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. But also, as always, we strongly encourage you to throw questions into the questions window. We keep an eye on that as we're going through our discussion and try to answer them in line as best we can. Also, again, as always, this webinar is being recorded, so you can always review this later and share this with other team members who are not able to be present with you today. With that, let's jump right in, and we're going to start talking here about core Hive concepts. Brian, what are we talking about? Why are we talking about Hive today?
Yeah, we thought it best to start with, why? What is central to Hive and why does it apply to AutoCAD, and what can we improve in our AutoCAD block library management using Hive? And what I would like to do is rather jump right into a live demo and start right in AutoCAD and show you guys and basically talk through briefly some of the ways we're managing our AutoCAD content today, specifically the block libraries. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And we are here in Vanilla AutoCAD 2021. So let's talk about block library management. There's a variety of ways to do this. There's some legacy ways that are still in play. For example, oftentimes we have just single blocks as a single DWG like this, and we insert these or drag these into our drawings. And it basically is a single drawing with a simple sketch in it, right? And those get inserted. That's a very standard legacy way to do it. We might manage our blocks as block definitions in what we like to call container drawings. So you might have a whole series of blocks for a particular discipline or use case. And in there you have a whole lot of block definitions, okay? Now, either of those sources are great, and we need those. We always need the DW source content. But there isn't a lot of flexibility in it, right? I mean, if I've got these container drawings, I can go to Design Center like this, and they'll show up for me here, and I can press and drag them into my project drawings, but I can't really search. I can't really sort things. And so that's where tool palettes came into play, right? Now, these have been around for a while, and we can still use tool palettes to reference single blocks and single DWGs or container drawings like this. So I've got some over here, and I'm pointing to different blocks sitting in DWGs. And we also have the added benefit now with tool palettes of being able to specify things like the insertion layer, or does it prompt for rotation when it comes in? And we can give things a unique name and it gives it a little thumbnail, right? And we can put all sorts of things on tool palettes, be it a PDF help guide or you name it, okay? And so there is a big attraction to tool palettes. The other thing we can do with tool palettes is we can organize them any way we want. We can create tabs, okay? We can organize them into different groups. And while there's a fair amount of information about the blocks and how they'll insert into our project drawings, what we're still lacking is what? It's the ability to quickly find what we're after. As an end user, I'm clicking through different blocks, I'm scrolling through these different things to find what I'm after. There's no way to quickly search for this stuff. As a CAD manager, a BIM manager, I'm managing all this stuff. And you know, I've set up tool palettes for a lot of companies over the years, having been a CAD consultant for a long time. And you know, getting their DWG content set up is one thing, no small task certainly. But then getting them loaded on tool palettes, continually maintaining these and making sure they show up for everyone properly, right? That the administration of tool palettes and these background ATC files is no small task, to the point that a lot of you perhaps have just even shied away from tool palettes because they're such a pain in the rear sometimes. Yet they're as good as it gets in AutoCAD block library content management today. So let's jump into Hive now that we get a sense of what are we trying to solve with Hive and block libraries, right? I'm going to turn it back to Sean. He's going to introduce you to the Hive experience, the basic end user experience in Hive as it relates to blocks. Sean?
Yeah, so this basic end user interaction, how do I, the end user, work with this? Because that's kind of what we're ultimately setting up for, right? The admins, we can go through some pains here and there, but the end user interaction is really where it's at. And so I want to take you through Hive as an end user live, because again, you know, here at CTC, we're not big on death by PowerPoint. So we're going to jump into AutoCAD. We're going to jump into AutoCAD with the Hive CMS specifically, which I can get to once installed from my CTC software tab. I've only got one of our tools installed, and it is the Hive CMS. And as I double click on that, what it'll do is, or as I click on it, it'll open up the Hive. And because I was already signed in before as one of our end users, Joe Demo, I have access to Hive now from this user's point of view. I have very limited actual access to certain things in the user interface. I can search for content. I can save some of my own searches for repeatable things that I do over and over again. And I can also ask for some things if I'm not finding everything that I need. Now, what I like to do from this Home tab actually is initiate my searches right from here. You can see I've got a big block of saved searches. I've got a big block here of libraries, some tags that I can auto filter for. And if you're using Revit specifically, there's some special Revit categorization filters that are pre-built in. And we're talking AutoCAD today. So what I'm going to do is jump into my libraries, and I'm going to use this out-of-the-box AutoCAD content library that I just have at my fingertips, at my disposal, that one of my CAD managers, like Brian, had set up for me and allows me to then use quickly to find some content. Here you can see as I clicked on that, kind of like tool palettes, it instantly loads up with a bunch of things, giving me just my AutoCAD content for this out-of-the-box library. You can kind of think of this like a tool palette group of sorts. And of course, I have other libraries that I could search through, but right now I'm just using this out-of-the-box one. I can also see some dynamicness or scalability here. And Brian, would you do me a favor and temporarily mute yourself? I'm getting feedback through your mic. So I have, in this case, the dynamic blockness of it, the automatic scaling attribute type properties here, the annotative properties, kind of just some symbology on these blocks. And as I scroll down, Hive automatically loads some additional content that might be available to me. Now, if I want something specific, there's a number of ways I can go about this. I can, again, use a saved search, perhaps, if I know that I want my doors or I want some specific kind of content or specific details or whatever. Or I can just as an end user type something in, like door. And this will run through and filter my entire library for things that are door. Or if I want a window, I tend to do a lot of architectural things. So, window, I can just find that. You can also go a little deeper than this. In tool palettes, that's as far as I can go. Actually, I can't even search, but I can understand by name as I browse through the list of different tabs. But here, let's say that I wanted something that was specifically 36 inches wide. I'm going to search 36 and see what shows up. Notice here, nothing about the file name or the block name says anything about 36. And yet it shows me these two entries. They're both dynamic blocks. That's pretty cool. If I show the details about these blocks and I click on, say, this door, this elevation symbol of a door, you'll notice that the dynamic width of this door, one of the properties it has is 36. Hive dug into my AutoCAD block content and gives me access to some of this information here. If I was looking for things from a specific layer, I could search for that layer because that's a property that I can actually search. Ultimately, if I want to insert this into my model environment, I simply double click on this, kind of like I would from a tool palette, just click on it and load it in and drop that into my design space, and I get all the full functionality of whatever this door is. Insert it onto whatever layer it was told to insert onto, which in the case of my properties inside of the Hive space was just using the current layer, basically. There's nothing special about what layer it was going to, just defaulting, all right? That's a good starting point, but now what I want to do is I want to insert some kind of fire hydrant. Let's search for HYD. And sadly, I don't have any hydrants in my library right now. In my 46 individual blocks, one does not exist here that is a hydrant of some sort. So if I wanted something like that, maybe I have to ask my CAD management team for it. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to add a request. This actually opened up on my other monitor. I'm going to bring this over here. And actually, I wanted to bring across just the one tab. Let's do that. The one tab. There we go. And over here, if I want something new, you can see that my request has a couple of other requests for other kinds of content. Maybe it's got furniture families or reception desks or whatever, right? I want to make a brand new request. I'm going to create a request here, and I'm going to ask for a fire hydrant. Need a fire hydrant, I don't know, for reasons. It doesn't really matter why I want it, right? So, and I want to tell them like maybe it belongs in my AutoCAD content library, give them a suggestion of that. If I have blocks that maybe I've already built up, I can certainly attach those to this. Or if I have cut sheets from a specific manufacturer for some specific details, I can certainly, add that as well. And I can describe more about this. Maybe I want a plan symbol. So I want the plan symbol for a hydrant. Yeah, perfect. And then, we'll save this request, and my CAD management team will be notified that a fire hydrant is needed because there's reasons for that, whatever, right? And that I'm specifically looking for a plan symbol. And so I can run through multiple different kinds of searches, different ways. I can search all of the metadata of my content, and that's true for Revit and for AutoCAD. So it doesn't really matter. I can certainly add my own custom parameters. I can add, in the case of AutoCAD, custom attributes that just hold data, and all of that becomes searchable. Keep in mind, as I put in 36 here, this dug into my family, into a parameter about the width, the dynamic parameter of the width, and was able to pull that back out. And any other parameters that exist here for AutoCAD or Revit will show up as part of my search criteria. And I can save that. So if I've got other properties about, I don't know, you name it, level of development or something, right? I could put that in there as an attribute or a property or whatever and make that all searchable in the Hive space. Now, if you want to see more about searching really in depth, like better filtering, better control, stuff like that, we have a previously done webinar that talks very much about that filtering and searching and whatnot. But at a base level, this is what the user gets. I can search a library really fast. I can group stuff. I can refine that search. I can save common searches myself, or I can share them across the firm, and the whole company can benefit from this. So what I want to do now, since I need that hydrant, and Brian's probably already received that request, I'm going to actually transition back to him so he can talk about administering some content and getting me what it is I need. And this is where you're going to start seeing a big difference between Hive and tool palettes in the AutoCAD space. So Brian, you're probably still muted because I asked you to mute yourself.
Thanks, Sean. I was still muted. So I'm going to play the CAD Manager role here. And how do we add content? How do we manage content so it's available to all of our users with all those benefits that Sean had just shown you? And to do that, I want to go through a bit of a checklist here. This is actually the best practice recommendation we have for all of our current customers who use Hive, and of course new ones who will be joining soon. How do we do this? And there's a few steps here. First thing is to jump into CMS settings, our content management system settings. Make sure things are configured right. You then want to build out some groups. These are groups where you can assign specific permissions. You might have certain types of admins. You might have just end users, right? Certain people may only be consumers of content while others could be managers of it, and so on. We then want to move on to creating an actual library. And I'll go ahead and do this live in front of you guys. And we're going to create a couple custom tags as well that we can use to assign to that content. Now, Sean talked a lot about all the different insertion settings and attributes and things that can be not only searched, but stored as metadata in our libraries. There's a whole unlimited option too with tagging. We can tag this stuff with any kind of text we want. And then I'm going to jump from the admin portal, which is where I'll do those first 3 steps. I'm going to jump back into the CMS itself. That was the interface Sean was showing, where he was grabbing blocks and inserting them into his project, and we'll start adding content, okay? And then the recommended, we're not going to go through this in detail, but once you've got your library built, right, then you can basically unleash it to your users. And that's why we would do user creation after you've got everything created here. You'll basically add a bunch of users into those groups, and then users will have access to that content. And then once I've done my work as a CAD manager, then we're looking at content updating. At that point, I'm going to turn it back to Sean, and we'll see what his experience is as the end user once I've added all this content into it. Now, the management portal, that is that part where Sean had made a request. The CMS linked him directly to that. That is a browser-based portal. This is the web address that you can manage it through a full web portal or web browser, or you can even access it through a smartphone or tablet itself. So it's a separate system, and depending on the user's login permissions, they'll be able to do different things in there. Now I'm going to jump into the management portal, and I'm going to have full admin rights where we can do things like create libraries, create tags, all these sorts of things. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go from here. So this is the Hive management portal. You can see I've just got it open in Chrome here. And I've got a few more options than you may have seen in Sean's screen. I've got a dashboard here. I've got the CMS itself. And one of the first things I said we want to do is to take a look at our settings. Let's look at some of our organization settings. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but one I wanted to note was the option to cache our content in the cloud. Now, your DWG content itself, you're going to store that on your servers, and you're going to work on it as you make new blocks, right? That creation of those of that content is just as you always would do it, right? But as you load that into Hive, we can cache all that content to the cloud, and the point of that is that users can now access that stuff remotely from anywhere. They don't need to be able to VPN in or be on the network or anything like that. With a simple internet connection, they'll be able to get all the content they need. There's a users and groups option up here. I've got a variety of groups created in here. If we take a look at one of these, for example, let's go into the project managers one. There's a name, I can give it a description. And then over here on roles, these are all the different roles I can assign. Now I'm in here as an organization admin where I can basically do anything, but there's different admin roles. For example, a tag admin, They could create and assign tags so that perhaps at a single small office level, they could help sort that content that maybe at the kind of corporate BIM and CAD management level, you may not understand, right? You want to be able to give that kind of access, but a tag admin can't go in and create libraries and do mass changes like that. So you can simply add users to these groups, and then whatever group those groups are assigned to a particular library, all those users will get access. Let's go back to our CMS here. Let's go ahead and create a new library. Here are the libraries. You had seen Sean browsing through this one, searching through this one in Hive. We're going to go ahead and create a new library. We'll call it AutoCAD content, and this is going to be our own corporate content, right? So before it was the out-of-the-box content that comes with AutoCAD. I'm creating our specific CTC one here. Now, how you organize libraries, how many you make, it really depends on the size of your organization, how you want to organize things, right? A lot of different options there. Again, a whole lot of kind of administrative webcasts and help tutorials we've got on that that you can look up. I can go ahead and create this. Now I've gone and created that library. I can jump to the permissions tab here, and here I want everyone to be added to this library, and I can even select a role as well here. So I'm going to set everyone in here to have at least contributor roles, and I can add that down here. Okay, there's an invitations option there. That's not for inviting members within your own company. You can actually invite outside members, perhaps the contractor you're working with who needs to have access to some of that content. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now, as I said, this is kind of the process you would want to follow. Come in here and create a library, create multiple libraries, set up some groups, get your settings correct, and then go start adding that content. Get everything looking the way you want, and then come back to those groups, add those users, and then everyone will have access to everything. That's all set up and ready to go. Now, there's also a request tab up here. And now here as the CAD manager, I see that request from Sean. He needs a fire hydrant, okay? I understand what we're after, right? And this was a good reminder for me. So I'm gonna make sure that I get that when I jump into the CMS, start uploading content, I'm gonna make sure that fire hydrant is there. So here's the Hive CMS, the desktop application. Now, just like Sean, I have access to these libraries. If I go and refresh this, now I see that AutoCAD content library showing up. If I dive into that, it's empty. I haven't added anything yet. But as an admin, I now have an add content option. As an end user, Sean didn't have access to this, but I do, okay? Now, adding content into Hive, your AutoCAD content, we thought a lot about this, and we realized it's quite important to not only be able to give you all the options for your end users that Sean had shown you in terms of searchability and diving into the metadata within that content, but we need to make it easy for you guys to get from whatever legacy method you're using right now into Hive in the first place. And so we've covered a variety of options here. We can simply add files. This is what you might use when you have the single block and a single DWG library set up. So this was that one I had shown you, the well DWG. There's a single sketch in there that represents the well. Let's grab a few of these, open these up. It's going to scan those. Now, I've got AutoCAD open in the background, and part of the reason for that is that Hive generates thumbnails for you automatically. Okay, to be able to do that, we've got to, basically create a snapshot of it and bring it in here. Now, this content isn't in the library yet. This is basically the landing page of where once I tell it to process, it'll then add it. But I can come in here and start to configure things, right? So if you notice on the right here, there is a settings button. And in here, I get control over a variety of things. You'll see all the options you see in tool palettes and more in here. There's an instance name, okay? So I don't have to take the DWG name itself. I could give it a different name if I wanted. And then there's insertion parameters. Now there's a layer itself. Okay, what layer should this come in on? If it wasn't set up already, which would very likely be the case with the single block per DWG scenario, I can actually spell out a new layer right on the fly here. Okay, now this water layer was showing up here, and that's because that layer exists in that drawing already. But say that the layer did not exist, and you're moving to this kind of smarter content setup. I'm coming from a place where I just had a whole pile of DWGs. I want to start creating layers as I set this up. So if you do that and you type in a new layer, you can actually start to spell out, well, what does that layer look like? The color, the line type, okay? And now when this is brought into AutoCAD, a new layer will be created if it doesn't exist, and it'll have these properties. Okay. Now, last thing I do before I add it to the library, I have to actually choose which libraries it goes in. And I also have the option to tag things. Okay. If I didn't create them ahead of time, I can click on the create button here. It'll bring me right back to the admin portal, or I can just choose them from right here. So we'll leave tags off this for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and hit process. It's going to read those DWGs and process those and bring those into my library. So there's that one well that came in. Let's go back and add more content. Those others didn't come in. I might have missed something there, missed a certain setting. Just a heads up, as you're working on things, say you brought things in, you said you decided you didn't want after all. We can remove these like this from the list. And then go and grab other content. So single DWGs as blocks, we can do that. You can grab a whole folder, point to a single folder, and it'll grab 100 DWGs at once. But we've got those other scenarios too, right? Where we've got blocks inside of DWGs. So let's take a look at that. I'm gonna go and grab a single block that contains multiple DWGs. I'll grab this blocks with attributes option. And it's going to parse the entire drawing and look to find what's inside of it. And I've got a variety of different utility blocks in here. And here's where I have that existing hydrant block set up that Sean is after. So I'm going to hit add to this. It's going to process that. Again, AutoCAD engine itself is parsing through that stuff. It's creating thumbnails. And then it's also reading any content that I might have in there already associated with those blocks. For example, like layers and so forth. And you notice some of these tool palettes, or excuse me, some of these block entries, they're different colors, right? So like this hydrant elevation option here, if I jump into here, it actually is already assigned the layer water, which has the color blue. And that's because the block instance on that drawing was already residing on that layer. So even if you don't have tool palettes, you just have container drawings. If those block instances are sitting on a particular layer, that stuff will pass into the insertion settings of Hive. So you don't have to recreate any of those settings. There happens to be some dynamic properties. Those show up here as well. I can specify those, okay? Take a look at that existing hydrant. Now I'm jumping in, I'm grabbing one height or one instance at a time, but you can grab an entire set of block instances here. And we can jump into settings and we can specify things across the board for an entire set of perhaps landscape blocks or something like that. Let's go into here. Now, because that layer already resided in the drawing, again, I can just choose it here, or maybe it wasn't what I wanted, and I want something new. Okay, again, a lot of different ways to handle this, lots of flexibility. The point we've tried to do and make is that any data, any organization you have already set up in your block libraries, you can carry all of that forward, and then on the fly, you can adapt, make things different, and so forth. So I think I got things set up right here. We'll go ahead and process this. I know we had a couple issues processing that first file set, so hopefully this goes through fine. Now the next thing I'm going to do after this is I'm going to load tool palettes, and we kind of acknowledge that tool palettes are probably, you know, as good as it gets in AutoCAD right now, and there's a lot of shortcomings there. But all that data that has been set up, again, we want to be able to migrate that forward. But we have not only DWGs associated with our tool palettes, we have those ATC files. Those are basically the metadata files behind the scenes that allow us to manage how that stuff inserts. I'm back here. Okay, here's that hydrant coming in, and so on. Now let's go ahead and add some tool palettes. Under CAD files, there's another option here for blocks from AutoCAD palettes. These are the background ATC files. Those of you who aren't familiar with these, maybe you've done some tool palette work, but you kind of forget how it works. Each one of these tabs represent a single, each one of these files represent a single tab in an AutoCAD tool palette. Okay, so a single tab right here, all the metadata for those buttons is stored in that ATC. Okay, that's the information we're after. And in fact, in those ATCs, it actually points to the DWGs themselves. So I'm going to grab a tool palette here, and we're going to parse that ATC file, and it's going to find all the block content that resides on that tool palette. And here there was some survey monument stuff. There was also some landscape blocks. If I jump into one of these, again, we see layer assignment happening. Okay, again, we can change it if we want. Can assign some tags here if we want. Go ahead and process this. I apologize for a couple of errors we're having here. We're constantly improving and changing and updating Hive. And so Sean and I are running in beta environments oftentimes. So I apologize for some of those not loading.
It's also very interesting that this only tends to error when we are in the middle of like a go-to webinar.
Yeah, it's funny how I can do it 3 times this morning and it works fine, and then I come here. But anyway, like I said, your environment, obviously we're not running all these beta versions and databases, and so we're constantly doing that, so I apologize for that. So here is some of that content coming in. So at this point, right, you add all your content in, and you know, I was doing small sample sets just because we're in a webcast here and we don't want it to take a long time. But you very likely have thousands and thousands of blocks out there, organized and categorized in different ways, right? All of that will come in. Now, granted, you might have to walk away and grab a cup of coffee for a bit because we're counting on the AutoCAD engine to do this. And while Hive runs very quickly, the AutoCAD AXE is what it is. So, but it's all automated for you. It'll take in all those attributes, all those layer settings, and so forth. So next thing we'd want to do is assign those users. We would come back to the admin portal to do that. Now in my groups, I already have some users assigned. Okay, I'd assign that everyone group. I've got a variety of users in here already, so we're good to go on that. And then as a CAD manager, I'd want to be sure to come in here and say that that's completed now, Sean's request, and he'll get a notification on that and know that that's now available. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Sean, and we're going to look at what's it like for the end user now. As a CAD manager, I added all this content, but how does everything update for the end user? Sean?
Thank you, Brian. And you know what? This again is really where Hive shines over tool palettes. In the AutoCAD space, you have to take all those tool palettes, shut down your AutoCAD, let them write, put them on some network location, wait for the end user to restart their computer and have a script copy that down, or have them shut down their AutoCAD at minimum and copy it down manually before you can actually get that to them. Brian did none of that. What I'm going to do is live, I want to show you exactly what this does for me in the AutoCAD space. I have done nothing other than delete the door out of my AutoCAD drawing here a moment ago because I wasn't going to actually use that. I wanted to search hydrant inside of here. Now, specifically, I need Brian, when he marked that complete, he may have left me a comment as well telling me that it was in a different library. And so I would just need to make sure that I was searching the correct library here, the CTC content, AutoCAD content CTC right here. And if I reapply my search for this, let me just delete this and just apply this real quick. Yeah, see, I got all of his content instantly. There was nothing really special that I had to do other than just refresh my list of available libraries. And that was only because that was a brand new library that he added. From this point forward, I would never do that again. And there's that plan hydrant that I really wanted. And you can see here it's on seawater because that was the layer that Brian specifically made for this with the specific properties. And I can take this hydrant, and despite that seawater not existing inside of my AutoCAD drawing, I can grab that hydrant and drop it in, place this inside of here, and it gives me the seawater and also coincidentally defines depth points, but it has the right properties, and this hydrant is actually on the correct layer straight away. Me as an end user, very little to nothing that I have to do other than just search the Hive space and find the content that I wanted. So all of that is available really instantly with very minimal effort. You can process some things, and yeah, it might take you a little bit of time to get it to parse your tool palettes you've already got or your block libraries that you already have. But then once you've done that, it's instantly available to your users regardless of where you are. Brian and I can be working in two physically different locations. I can be working from home, grab this content, no need for a VPN connection into my office, no need to browse through a bunch of folder structures and wait for file copies. It's instantly available. Super streamlined, super simple. So what we want to do is kind of jump in and talk about a few conclusions that we think really matter for what we've talked about today. We've repeated these things a couple of times, but we want to just kind of reiterate here at the end before we jump into some formal Q&A. Important notes. Hive now fully supports native AutoCAD blocks. That's fairly new. It had AutoCAD content before, but now it fully supports the AutoCAD blocks, including all of their attributes, all of their dynamic properties, the layering, very much like tool palettes, and in some cases going even further than tool palettes. We showed you today how you can very easily add block content, controlling all of the insertion settings. We talked minimally about the tagging, so you can filter based on some of that tagging. In fact, I didn't show that, but over here in the filtration environment, I think Brian had tagged some of these as details. And if I was to apply that to my search, anything that was tagged as details specifically within this library shows up when I'm searching for absolutely everything. So you can use those tags to your advantage for discipline-specific workflows or sub-discipline-specific workflows. You can run some tagging just to make your life really easy for the end user and for yourself, a BIM manager, a CAD manager, to finally refine all of this content. We talked a bit about the access control via users and group permissions. Now, we didn't go super deep into this because we do have other discussions, other pre-done webinars that go very much in depth about the management of the CMS, what the rights mean. But the important step we didn't really talk to too much here today is that by using the access control, the group permissioning, I can even control whether a person can see a library or not at all. You may have certain groups, silos of practice at your firm. Maybe you're doing a lot of survey in one group and you're not doing a lot of road work with that group. Well, you can actually not give the survey team access to, say, the roadwork library. Makes it really easy. And that way, it's instantaneous again. With tool palettes, you have no control over that. You usually would just give everything out, and that would be about it. Maybe you've got some profiles, but it's kind of a complex workflow. In Hive, that access and control is instantaneous and super simple. And then finally, this easy support across wherever a person is, remote workers, workers in the office, it doesn't matter. This cloud caching means as soon as you add content, it is instantly available to absolutely everybody. Brian, did I miss anything, any conclusions that we wanted to touch on here today?
No, I think you pretty well covered it, Sean.
All right, fantastic. Now we want to cover one other major aspect about this before we're done, before we formally jump into the Q&A. Now, I see a couple of questions here. We're going to answer those in just a minute here. But how can you get your hands on this? We want to make sure that if you want to try this out for yourself in your firm, how can you do that? Well, it's actually pretty easy. I'm going to pull across to my screen here the ctcsoftware.com website. This is the easiest place to go. Just ctcsoftware.com right there. Go into products, and from products, just right here, there's a Hive action where you can get started using Hive. You can register right now to try Hive free for 14 days. Give it a shot yourself. Try it out. Throw your blocks in there. It's fully functional. You can add users if you want to, get other team members on your team trying to add content or not, and just browsing. And certainly if you have any questions about how to set this up beyond what we've talked about today, there's, of course, other webinars that we've done on Hive administration, but we never discount you asking us questions directly. Call us up, email us. We want to make sure that you're successful in using this Hive tool in your firm, especially as you're trying to use this now in the AutoCAD space. We always appreciate when you participate, ask questions. It makes it more interesting for us, and hopefully it makes it more interesting for you as well. We certainly look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Absolutely hit up our website, ctcsoftware.com. Try to register for that Hive, get Hive for yourself, try it out, and also check out our other webinars because we're constantly having events and webinars where we talk about other tools here at CTC. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.